I'm just going to look on my screen and let's start with Linda.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Linda Stewart. I am the Director of Professional Development Schools at Hood College, and very grateful to be here this afternoon. And I want me to turn it over to somebody else?
That would be perfect.
All right, I'll turn it over to Christy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Murphy Baldwin, Chief of Human Resources for Prince George's County Public Schools and the Vice Chair of Pillar 2. I will turn it over to Brian.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian King. I am a school principal in Charles County at an elementary school. And over to you, Patricia.
Good afternoon. I'm Patricia Twitty. I'm an instructional lead teacher at an elementary school in Prince George's County. And I think that's everyone on the Pillar 2 Advisory Committee. So I don't know if we're—
Can you turn it over to Joe?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't even see him. Joe, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Joseph Mako. I am the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation. I'm a former elementary school principal and a member of the Accountability and Implementation Board.
Thank you so much, Joe. And so now, Kristen, I'm going to have you and Julie introduce yourselves as our esteemed guest from Frederick County Public Schools.
Well, thank you so much. I am Kristen Canning, and I am one of 3 elementary instructional directors here in Frederick County, also a former principal at elementary. And I am one of the co-chairs of our Pillar 2 work group. So I'm here joined by Julie. I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm Julie Wynn. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Frederick County Public Schools. As Kristen stated, I'm one of the co-chairs. Mr. Timothy Thornburg could not be with us today, but he is our 3rd co-chair to our team.
Well, thank you so much, Julie and Kristen, for being here. We know that there's a board meeting happening with Frederick County Public Schools, so we are so thankful that you all were able to divide and conquer and share with us some of the things that you are doing with the career ladder. The career ladder is such an important component of the blueprint and of such an important component of Pillar 2. And we are very excited to be able to hear from an LEA about how they are planning for this career ladder. And so I think that Graham is going to be running the slides. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen and Julie to share their information.
Terrific. And if it's okay, I'll just get started, Julie, and we can kind of tag team. And certainly it's sort of hard back and forth in a virtual world. And so we sort of said, we'll get started, and we're pretty comfortable helping each other out. But, you know, you are right. The career ladder is a big bite and a huge part of what we all anticipate will be the success moving forward of all of our work. And so we were happy to kind of jump in and dive right in and share where we are with our work, but really do want to share it's most certainly a work in progress. We've, you know, as most of us right now, I think, have a whole lot more questions than we have definite plans of moving forward. But I think there's value to be gained from sharing kind of our thinking and our questions and just giving you an opportunity to see where we are. And we're eager to continue to collaborate and partner with others around the state. But Dr. Sarah Sergo is our Blueprint coordinator, also our chief of staff here in Frederick County. So she oversees all of the Blueprint, and then we shared with you our subcommittee leads. So you can move forward, and we'll share with you just a little bit of our goals for today, what we hope to be able to accomplish with you. We certainly have some preliminary thoughts about structures for Career Ladder, and we have a good structure for the work moving forward. We hope to be able to outline some of the places we feel like we're moving forward and gaining some momentum, where some of our ongoing work still is. We definitely have some of those big questions that, you know, we're working through and hoping to continue to gain more insight on, but we'll hope to be able to answer questions you have and just share some of our work. You can just move forward. Thank you. So when FCPS approached our career ladder, or actually our blueprint work, we divided out, like most of our cohorts around the state, into subcommittees, and each of our subcommittees has representation from across our system. This graphic just demonstrates our subcommittee, and that today we'll really be focusing in on the career ladder work as it relates to Pillar 2. And moving forward, we can share with you that when we started our work initially, you can move forward one, thank you. We really spent much of the first year focusing on the components of Pillar 2 that were needed to be completed in order for us to turn in our plan. So the national board certification pieces, the coordination with our Office of Organizational Development and Professional Learning. And so spent a lot of time in this first year, last year, building up those components of the plan. We divided our work group immediately into some smaller groups to accomplish some varied tasks. The scheduling component is a huge part of the career ladder as we anticipate shifting teacher schedules to a 60-40 model. We have a group who's working on and looking at the implications of that on our work moving forward. And then we had a component of a group of our teachers working in the NBC area, and then a large group working on the career ladder. And much of our focus so far has really been on level 3, knowing that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of how we in FCPS are going to hold up the career ladder with level 3 teachers, how we're going to reward some longevity of teachers who remain in level 3, what kind of horizontal expansion that might look like, and what our designs of our models might be. So that's kind of a big picture view of where we've been. And you can advance for us. So we did mention that there have certainly been some successes, and certainly our collaboration is one of them. In our work group, we have representation from all of our bargaining units. So our teachers union and our administrator union have representation at the table as we're having conversations. We found that to be definitely a way to streamline the work we know that's ahead. All parts of our career ladder, we know we make recommendations and decisions are going to maybe be made at negotiations. So having those conversations ongoing with our units has helped us, we feel, to set ourselves up to be more productive when it comes down to making some decisions. We spent a lot of time, as I know many of us did, really working through that definition of a teacher. That's a big piece because we know that there are significant implications for compensation that surround that. We spent a lot of time working on that and gained some consensus on how we think that we can honor some of the work of our teachers now by expanding a little bit on level 3 and who might fit into level 3. We'll share a little bit more of that with you. And again, like we said, just definitely some good collaboration with our unions as we consider negotiations coming up. Certainly, we also have some places where we're continuing to focus. And so we continue to be creative and think through how we're going to do much of what we want to do with some of the limitations of funding. I know that's a piece we're all working through. And then we're going to share with you a little bit of some of the areas where we feel clarity would be helpful in some of the language within the career ladder to help us make certain that we don't go too far down one path and need to come back and redirect. And then one of our pain points really is thinking about how we continue to incentivize moving folks into positions that are not meeting the definition of a teacher as the blueprint language is written, so therefore aren't going to be incentivized in the same manner, but are equally as important. And then again, defining the movement within level 3 is a place we're moving back and forth with often. And so those are some of the places that our group is continuing to work. Thanks, you can move forward. So I shared that one of our parts of level 3 that we've really worked hard on is trying to determine how to hold up a career ladder that honors the work of teachers, continues to incentivize ongoing professional growth, when the blueprint language is that a level 3 teacher is an NBC, unless there's no assessment comparable where a master's degree in that subject area would suffice. Well, currently we have 50 national board certified teachers here in Frederick County. we're working very hard, and our Office of Organizational Development is doing a beautiful job at setting up systems and supports to certainly expand the number of teachers that we have that are NBC. We have about 50 in the pipeline right now that are pursuing. But even looking across with those 100 NBCs, not all of those are teachers. We have some administrators with National Board Certification and other positions through the system. So there is an immediate recognition that we as a system may need to look at expanding what else we can consider as a definition that would fit for the qualifications that would rise a teacher up to level 3. And so we are discussing right now the possibility of including the teachers who have a master's or an equivalency on level 3 of the career ladder. And then us as a system taking the local share of the salary enhancement of the $5,000 that we also give to National Board Certified as a way to, again, recognize the high quality teachers that we do have in the classroom, many that we think would make excellent lead teachers if they chose to move through, but are not nationally board certified now. So that's work that our group will continue to look at, but this is a huge part of our conversation and what we continue to come back to. Thank you. You can forward. And you can forward again. All right. So we don't have what I would call yet models to share. They are definitely works in progress. They're very drafty, and many of them are a result of where we started in this process, which was really just an ongoing ask us your questions, tell us what doesn't make sense, make recommendations for possible solutions to some of the problems we're identifying. And then from that, we began to build out, based on feedback, some of what we were hearing of what potential parts of our ladder could look like. So we really started talking about 3 different models, the first 2 being quite similar and the third really being quite different. So in our first model, when we talked through, again, we talked about teachers entering level 3 with either the master's equivalency or an NBC, and moving up the ladder would really be based on your years of service, your degrees earned, and we would certainly continue to work on what that might look like. Model 2, similarly, has teachers entering in with the NBC or equivalency to level 3, but we've looked a lot at our current positions that we have in FCPS, and one example is our reading and literacy our literacy and math is what that should say, specialists. Their job description and how we're using them right now is really quite similar to what the career ladder is looking for in a lead teacher. And so we need to think a little bit about, Model 3 talked about, do certain positions within our system enter the career ladder with the option to enter at level 4? So would we repurpose some positions from content level specialists to lead teachers potentially in different contents supporting the work in our schools? So Model 2 provided an opportunity to look more closely at certain positions we have and where they may land. Model 3 was the most different. Model 3, again, the first bullet's the same, but in this model, we looked at how movement up the ladder could be based upon achievement units or points or ways that teachers would gain credits, if you will, for things like professional learning, ratings on evaluations, participation in certain professional opportunities. We shared all 3 of those models in a very loose form and provided opportunities for feedback, and we got a lot. And so we'll share a little bit as we move through the pros and cons of some of those, but you can certainly advance that one.
Next slide, Graham.
Thank you. So some of the questions that we got from our groups as we shared our different models that we bring to you and we continue to work through. There are concerns from teachers and administrators about the use of evaluations for advancement. There's concerns about a need for an oversight group or a peer assistant review group. That we do a lot of calibration in Frederick County Public Schools. We really work hard to make our evaluation process a rubric-based process, but we also know there's a human component to that. And so when we tie an evaluation to advancement on a ladder, which could lead then to incentives and pay, that's not, people aren't real comfortable with that yet. There's a lot of conversation too about many of our teachers may want to remain in level 3, and that's fine. You know, we need great teachers in the classroom. And so how would we continue to provide enhancements within level 3, honor the, you know, purpose of our career ladder, which is to improve instruction in the classroom? How are we going to continue to help those teachers grow? We talked about here, we have an excellent professional development group of teachers in our organizational development department. Should we consider some completion of local opportunities that we think are important for all our teachers to have specific trainings and requirements? Would that be a way to continue to provide professional learning in level 3? And then certainly, I'm sure most systems have several positions that are stipend positions. We gave some examples here of your leadership team, your SIP chair, department chairs or team leaders. How can we think differently about those positions, and should those positions be connected to different positions on the career ladder? So would there be a way to repurpose those funds to support those efforts? A whole lot of conversation about conditional certification. We have a lot of conditional certs here. I know a lot of us in our hiring crisis right now have more than normal. So where are we going to honor? Where do they land in that career ladder, and how do we move them through? We've talked about the concern with teachers or staff who don't meet the blueprint definition of teacher, school counselors, administrators, many of our central office specialists, critical roles. But we're concerned that unless we do something to very intentionally incentivize those positions, we're going to have a hard time continuing to see people moving into those, because there are greater incentives to stay and do different things. So we have one more slide with some questions that we've been discussing. The first one I talked a little bit about: are there opportunities to look at roles we currently have and see if they may fit into the career ladder in one of our levels now? Lots of conversation, and there's a little bit of information later in the presentation about conversations we've had about an assistant principal working 20%, teaching 20% of their working time. If that is going to be where we land, do we have to consider another role that would protect something like a dean of school management, who would then tend to some of the things that an assistant principal may not be able to tend to, with an additional responsibility for teaching? And then I think this, guys, is the overarching question we continue to come back to, is how do we stay true to this really amazing opportunity to do transformational work, but make it simple enough and easy enough for people to understand and appealing enough so that it's a recruitment and retaining tool. You know, we want people to want to come and work with us, and we want our career ladder to be one where it's not incredibly difficult to see where you are and where you could go, and how you could be compensated for what you've done. So just trying to make it, I think, probably user-friendly is a way to encapsulate that thought. Thank you. You can move to the next slide. We talked a little bit about this one previously. You guys had shared some questions with us ahead of time, and these are some of the ones that you shared. We mentioned these previously, and again, when we're thinking about how we incentivize movement into these positions, we are talking about that in our work group all the time, because when you look at the list of the roles on the screen, you know, we can't hold anything up if we don't have people in these positions who are willing to stay there and do the hard work. So thank you. You can go to the next slide. We talked about this too, and this is where the achievement units came in, or other ways that we can look for continued professional growth and rewarding that professional growth for our veteran teachers and teachers who are gaining in their years of service, who don't have a desire to advance to become a lead teacher. This is a question that we're working through. Next slide. And then a lot of conversation about the implications for a change in schedule for our teachers, the 60-40 schedule, and then of course for moving up the 50-50 and even more, where the question that you posed is on the left about vacancies. And I think really our focus has been more on what will the implications be for our school calendar and or our staffing formulas. Moving to a 60-40 schedule has an incredibly exciting opportunities to serve students better, to provide teachers more time for really important work of collaboration and honing their craft. But we also then have to account for 100% of student learning time. And so we really recognize there's two ways for us to do that. It is either going to mean some significant increases in building staffing, so more teachers to help share the load, or it's going to mean some changes to our school calendar where we can find some more release time potentially for teachers to do some of that 40% time when students are not in the building. And so we're working through those things. And John, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to kind of talk as we go?
I just want, I'm sorry, Kristen. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity and just to make sure when you're talking 60, 40, 50, 50, you are talking about percent time in the classroom as a teacher and percent time doing other duties.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. Yep, absolutely. And I think it's a little bit in a couple slides, but yes, so 60% of the time actively teaching in the classroom, 40% of the time on collaboration, tutoring, professional learning, and those sorts of activities. And so if you want to go to the next slide. So this piece, one of your questions too on the left, and again, maybe a clarification for us here in Frederick County, the blueprint language about an assistant principal, we shared on the screen that they teach in the classroom 20% of their working hours or working time. When you posed the question, it was posed as teachers, assistant principals and principals serving as teachers of record. So we wanted to make just a point of clarification, or perhaps just our interpretation, that we don't see our principals or assistant principals serving in the role of a teacher of record. And I believe the blueprint language is more about the 20% of their working time for an assistant principal and an encouragement of 10% of working time for principals. So is that your understanding as well?
So I want to hear a little bit from our board members, because what I was curious to, my first thought is, if they're not teacher of record, then how are you interpreting teaching in the classroom for at least 20% of the working hours? Is it doing substitute teaching? Is it,
yeah.
What would that look like if there weren't the teacher of record?
No, thank you for that. And so can you flip to the next slide for me? I think that's there, but let's take a look and make sure. Here we go. Yes. So what we were thinking about, and our conversations have been about, our assistant principals providing instruction through tutoring small groups, co-teaching in the classroom, extended learning opportunities after school with small groups. And again, we're here to share and to listen. And so our thinking really was, and it goes back a little bit to the slide before about potentially considering a role of like a dean of school management. The reality of an assistant principal's school day is, if we were to attempt to make them a teacher of record, and if they, for example, in a middle school had a block of an English block that they taught, right? Our concern really is in the consistency of that assistant principal's availability every day to be the teacher of record, the teacher in the classroom, knowing the unpredictability of things that happen during a school day, crises that come up, and needs that are needed to be addressed by administration. So that's an important clarification, I'm sure not for us, but for all of us doing this work. There's a significant difference between a teacher of record and, teaching for 20% of your day. And then additionally, helping us make that clarification right now in the principal language, it encourages a principal to teach 10% of the working day, not looping them in with an assistant principal where it was a 20%. A requirement to teach 20% of the day.
Yeah.
So maybe a pause here would be great for us too.
Yeah. So I'm going to share one perspective that I have that I've shared with the committee, but then I want to turn it over to my committee members. To be candid, I might have even been the one who sort of mentioned and emphasized the teacher of record component. And I share that for a couple of reasons. So prior to getting into public school education, I taught at 2 private schools. And at private schools, it's very fascinating, at least the ones that I worked at, every single person, the principal, the headmaster, everybody taught at least one class as teacher of record. I personally always felt that was a powerful thing, because if your AP or your principal, one of their roles should be the instructional leader, what better way to actually demonstrate it than doing that instruction? So if Joe is, I'm picking on Joe because I see you, Mayor. If Joe is, a math teacher and I'm a math teacher and Joe is struggling and comes to me for support, I can certainly tell Joe, well, when I was teaching 10 years ago or things like that, this is what I did. Or I can tell Joe, hey, Joe, come to my 5th period class and come see what I'm actually doing right now. So I probably influenced the language of teacher of record because that was an experience. And to your point, Kristen, about the things that come up, oftentimes the classes that were taught by the high level administrators were co-taught by 2 of them. And so almost always there was at least one person there. So I mentioned that as one possible model or way to do that, but I want to turn it over to the rest of the board because I do know that this was a topic of conversation in our last meeting, and I want to hear some thoughts. Brian, Patricia, Christy, Linda, your thoughts or especially around this issue. Please feel free to take yourself off mute.
So I just want to weigh in that I'm in alignment with Kristen, and what the legislation says is that assistant principals on level 3 shall teach in the classroom 20% of their working hours. It does not identify that they have to be teacher of record. So that is not in legislation. So I think that that's where it's left up to the LEAs to determine what that looks like. I guess the question that I remember having, or that continues to exist, is there a definition on how we are defining the working hours? Is that within a year, or is that within a week, or is that within a day? LEAs are in need of that answer when it comes to the assistant principals. And then for the principals, it is the conversation they are encouraged. So I do think that is a totally different perspective. And I know that many may be experiencing this as well with the teacher crisis right now. I've kind of moved away from the word shortage because a shortage implies we're going to get more. It's a crisis now, and that we do have assistant principals now who are have their own classes. They're going in and supporting when teachers are out. So I do think the AIB, if possible, can give some definitions around that. That would be helpful. So to answer, that's just my piece of that portion.
Thanks so much, Kristen. Brian, Patricia, Linda, or Joe as well.
So I'm going to say, I think John just put it in here about the word teach, because my interpretation of, or my understanding of in the classroom teaching at least 20% of their day would be teaching, like not a small group or a pull out, but actually teaching the class. But that's just my belief and interpretation. So my question to that was, if I'm teaching, what if I'm not certified in the content that I'm teaching? So if I am a art teacher or PE teacher who has worked up through administration, am I teaching PE and art, or am I teaching reading, math, science, so on and so forth? Or if I am, certified in elementary, but I'm a principal or an assistant principal at a high school, and I'm not certified in that content area, what does that look like? So I do agree that language, and I think it's more so of teach in the classroom for 20%. What does that mean? Because all of the levels on the career ladder use the same definition. 60% actively teaching, I believe, is what it says. So if we're interpreting actively teaching at a level 1, to me, that would be the same as a teacher of record, or you're actively having a class, but I don't know if that's right.
And I'm just looking at what Kristen had shared, on this slide, and considering for APs, like I'm drawn to this whole idea of co-teaching, and when I think about how we observe and do teacher evaluation, and how we're providing feedback, and how we're actually moving teachers in their own practice and having, you know, an AP actively engaged with a teacher in the classroom with kids, because the ultimate impact should be on student learning. And how is that actually modeled, and how are we following up on feedback that's provided? So I think there's a lot of potential in that aspect of what this could look like, and for a principal, you know, as well. So I gravitate toward things like that and actually helping grow, you know, our teaching force as well.
And just to chime in, well, first off, thank you for the presentation. It just reinforces how complex this work is. It starts with a pretty simple proposition, and then very quickly, it gets very, very complicated. Graham, if you could go back to the slide with the 3 different models, that would help me kind of keep track of my thoughts. So I thought this really got me thinking, because like I just said, you know, this simple proposition of a career ladder, and very generally, it's a nice headline phrase, and everybody says, yes, that's a good thing. We want that for our profession. But what you guys are showing here is that there are a lot of different ways to go about it, depending on roles in the school system. And I just wonder if, as 24 LEAs struggle with this and start to come to different models, if you guys are working with nearby LEAs to bounce ideas off, or if it's more just kind of an in-house thing right now. Because to me, what you guys are doing versus what we're doing in Charles County, it's sometimes if we don't talk to each other, it takes the feel of competition. Who's got the best career ladder? Who thought about this contingency and who didn't? So what I'm getting at is, like, how might LEAs, and maybe the AIB staff has a role in this, come together and brainstorm out all these models and bring different perspectives, so that maybe everybody walks away with, you know, their top 2 or 3 ideas that are going to work in their county. So I guess buried in there was a question about how much has gone outside of Frederick and how much is it in-house.
Yeah, no, Brian, I appreciate that perspective so much. And the quick answer to your question is, to this point, it's been more in-house. And honestly, it's not for lack of trying. We are very eager to start the conversation with our neighboring counties and just our school system brothers and sisters in Maryland in general. We are feeling like what we don't want to do is set up like a Hunger Games of school systems, right? Like where people are, one person's career ladder looks so different than another. There's going to be variation that's natural. I don't think it makes sense that there's not ongoing collaboration, though, about what makes the most sense for the work we have to do. And to speak to the complexity, I don't know that I've ever been a better example of, like, you take 3 steps forward and then somebody asks a question, you're like, bam, you're 2 steps back, because you're like, oh, well, yeah, we didn't think about that. And so I think that we began the conversations that became more collaborative as Pillar 2, the completion of the Pillar 2 template was due, right? Because we got together and we talked about this. And I really think that many systems, us included, we're nowhere near like far down the line, are very much at the beginning stages of thinking. And so I think there's a little bit of reservation of, I don't know if I want to put out what I'm doing yet, because I don't know if it's so far off from what everybody else is thinking, or I don't think, certainly not from Frederick County's perspective, clearly there's no intention of secrecy for anything we're doing. We think the power is in the collaboration. We can't imagine our questions are unlike many questions that everybody else is grappling with. So yes, I think that we're eager to begin the collaboration. I think people are in different places in terms of their comfort with just being able to get together at this point. But I see that being a huge part of our work moving ahead.
And Kristen, I can echo those sentiments. All of the LEAs are, unfortunately nervous about a Hunger Game, and worried about what we're putting in our career ladder, and will it will we lose teachers because another system doesn't allow, it's not as strenuous as somebody else's. So I think that is definitely a conversation all of us are having. And I can say the same questions you brought up are the same questions that I'm getting from individuals in our school system. I think the only thing that I'm looking at your work that made me reevaluate what our interpretation is, and perhaps Joe can give some guidance, and if not, that's fine. It's on the level 3. So the legislation wants to push people to be MBCT. And so level 3, and I'm also looking at the document on another screen, but level 3 is for an MBC. But if you don't have it, that's when you can look at someone's a master degree in the subject area. Am I to understand that you're going to offer your level 3 for someone who doesn't have an MBCT and just has a master's degree in a subject in, let's say, just mathematics?
So remembering that what we are putting together now are our recommendations that would go forward. And obviously they have to be within the guidelines and comply with what the legislation tells us to do. We continue to hear from both our union and others that the career ladder is a floor, right? So whatever the career ladder has, you must have, but you can add to and you can adjust so that there's no ceiling. So the conversation about us beefing up, if you will, level 3 of the career ladder really was in response to the floors that you have, that it says that NBC is 1. We can't take that away, but how else can we recognize what may land in a teacher at level 3? So again, this is such a great opportunity for us to both share, ask, and gain clarity. If I'm hearing you say that there's the potential for different LEAs to add a master's to level 3 would not be something that would be accepted, that'd be a really important piece, I think, just for us moving forward. So maybe some feedback on that.
Kristen, before we get to some discussion on that, I want Dr. Sergo to have the opportunity. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump into this meeting just to introduce yourself. And yes.
John, hi, everybody. I know you are in great hands with Kristen Canning and Julie Nguyen from our team, but I'm Sarah Sergo. I am the Chief of Staff for Frederick County Public Schools. I have a couple of different hats I wear. I'm the Chief of HR. I'm also the Blueprint Implementation Coordinator and steer the work of our district. And as I know, Kristen and Julie shared with you, our model is to have a steering committee with subject matter experts leading in each of the pillars and making sure that we actualize the spirit of the blueprint, the letter of the law, but also take advantage of opportunities inside of that law to elevate our teachers and our leaders in that work. So I know you're in great hands. I'm here as a supporting cast member to answer any questions from a system-wide perspective, and just want to acknowledge the members of our team for their expertise and excellence, and for all of you accepting us in our vulnerability and our design state as we do this work together. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Kristen, I want to get to some of the follow-up on Christy's comment, and it's actually a conversation that Joe and I have had about meeting so many national board certified teachers, and you may not have them all right away. This is my potential interpretation, so this is not official law or anything else, but I think that I could see that as the number of national board certified teachers are growing. So I want to begin with, I interpreted things the way that Christy said, that the law talks about level 3 being national board certified. And, I think to myself, I'm not national board certified. I have had the honor of winning national level recognition and awards in math and science teaching, but I'm not national board certified. So I'm thinking, wow, could that, by this law, keep me out of lots of opportunities? But we know that there's a need for lots of National Board Certified teachers to serve in the roles as mentors to all these other things. So potentially, as things are ramping up, there could be the possibility of, if you have a math teacher who has other qualification, has a master's, could fill a role for level 3, but then with the expectation of, maybe working towards national board or something like that. I had the same type of question about the master's equivalency, because right now, I don't know if, in my opinion, I would equate getting a master's, having a master's with national board certification. In some ways, I would say it could be easier in some pathways to pursue a master's versus national board. So that's one thing I was curious about. If
Yeah, well, and John, thank you for that. And one of the things that you said really resonates with the conversations that we've had, which is there's no question that national board certification is a highly regarded, it's a great accomplishment, and the experience that you get from becoming a nationally board certified will serve you well as you move forward in your career. I think that you said it there. You've been nationally recognized, for your teaching abilities in math and science. We have teachers who are looking at the career ladder and sort of saying, how are we putting a hierarchy of, what endorsement is more important than another? And so are there ways for us to recognize and hold up, teachers who have a track record and have a professional resume of things that would indicate they would be greatly successful in some of the roles that we need in order to hold our career ladder up and provide the mentoring and support that is such an integral part of what the career ladder is supposed to accomplish. And so that's where the conversation evolved into other ways. Now, your point's a good one. Like, there are certainly ways we could say you can hold this role for this many years while you're pursuing, and that there's an expectation in this many years that, that you have this designation. But it's a part that's going to be an important clarification for us moving forward, for all of us moving forward, because I think, to remind you at the beginning of our presentation, we're a large system and we have 50 teachers that are nationally board certified right now, 50 more in the making. So I know, Graham, I just saw our 10-minute warning. So yeah, again, very, very similar to the conversations we're having in our work group. So I appreciate that.
Can we get some clarity? I'm going to turn to Joe or Rachel around this.
Yeah.
What's the recommendation to districts that don't have enough national board certified teachers at this moment and may not have them in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So for one, thank you everybody for not just the presentation, but surfacing all these questions, because I think it's a lot of these gray areas and the kind of messiness that we need to go through and flush out. And I think these are questions that need to be taken up with the full board in order to provide some clarity. So I think the two issues in particular that I have taken from this meeting is, getting a better understanding about what it takes to enter level 3 on the career ladder needs to, really be delineated and provide more clarity by the full board. And then also understanding what the denominator is when we're trying to ascertain the 20%, 40%, and 50% time. Is this, is the denominator the length of a school day? Does the school day, does that include or exclude the lunch period, or is it the span of the entire school year? So those are things that that a lot more clarity is needed to be provided. I think for my understanding at this point is that, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think some of this is the way that the legislation is written is to move up to the higher levels of the career ladder. Ultimately, national board certification will be needed in order to reach the higher rungs, but that's only at the point in which the AIB has determined that, the career ladder is robust enough and has enough national board certified teachers within it in order to, sustain movement to the higher levels of the career ladder. Now, I think the financial incentives that are attached, it's my understanding that those are specifically for individuals that have national board certification. So to get the additional, funding increase for being a board certified teacher, you really need to have that certification or be in an area where board certification is not available and you have a master's equivalent.
I ask a question as I know we're wrapping up. How is this information being communicated to positions in your district that might, as you mentioned, the specialists and the coaches that are currently serving in various roles on the career letter? So if the interpretation is that they would need to be nationally board certified, how is that being communicated to teachers that might be greatly impacted by the new career letter, so that they have an opportunity to prepare, adjust, do whatever they need to do to at least have the opportunity to maintain their position?
Sure. So we actually have multiple ways that we're communicating. First, we have representation from each of those groups on our work group. And so there's some outsourcing of information that goes back to folks. Additionally, we are working with our public affairs department to put out different publications of information, and also to have videos that describe the different components like this that are going to be important for teachers to know. And then, of course, the inclusion of our union representation in our group. They're very vocally sharing with their folks about where we are with things. But again, quite honestly, we're sharing with a bit of reservation until we have some clarity on some of the pieces moving forward. And and I do think there was one slide, guys, that we have at the end that might be a nice kind of wrap up. If you want to loop us all the way to the last slide, it just says information we need to move ahead. How's that for a title? But so again, and you have these slides, so I'll take only a moment, but as we're also moving forward to get clarity on some of the questions of the slides previous, there's ambiguity around the definition of pursuing on level 2. So a teacher on level 2 is pursuing their NBC or a master's in a field that does not have an NBC. And just some clarification is that how long can you be pursuing, and what's the amount of time? We've talked a lot about the assistant principal and principal. So again, just a question about, will there be consideration for first clarifying that language we talked about earlier, and any adjustment in the language for an assistant principal to mirror that of an encouraged, but not required. And then the rest of the bullets, I know we're running out of time. You can take a look, but everybody's worried, I know, about the funding that that is going to be required to move forward with a lot of the great things that we want to do. So the final one speaks to what we just talked about, but for principals. At this point, principals do have to have their NBC, but there's a waiver process. We don't know what that waiver process is yet. And again, just getting a little bit of clarity, that put the information in there for us to understand what that waiver may look like, how long that waiver may last for, and how we need to be preparing our future administrators and our younger sitting administrators for what they might need to do in order to maintain where they are or to gain a position in the future.
And Joe, can I add to your list our conversation around what is that teaching 20% of is that a teacher of record, or is that working with the small, what does that mean for the assistant principals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to flesh that out.
And I can chime in there real quick, Joe, and John. MSDE convened to help define teacher, which I think, Kristen, you mentioned at the beginning, we had to get down to the nitty gritty, right? There's a lot of specifics that just have to be spelled out so that we're all operating on the same page. So Joe and I will take this information back. I've made a nice list of the questions that have come up today as things that we know that we need to dig into and be able to provide guidance on, which will be in collaboration with MSDE, as their work in this as well. So we'll definitely take these things back, and I'd like to thank the whole team for digging into this. It's time that we open up the conversation, and Frederick County, kudos to you for being vulnerable and sharing this with everybody. I know that there's a lot of conversation happening around the state and you've helped open the conversation for everybody and identify some of those sticking points that we'll need to iron out moving forward. So Joe and I will definitely take this information back to both our staff and the board, and also MSDE, so that we can start working on some of these guidance pieces that are needed.
And I just want to echo everything that Rachel said. Thank you so much, Dr. Sergo, Julie, and Kristen, for taking the risk and being willing to say, we're going to share what we're doing. And we don't have everything perfectly laid out, but we think it's important. And Kristen, to your point about how do we start getting LEAs to start sharing with one another? Well, this is one way that we are doing it. You know, this will be posted on the AIB website. And the hope is that it can be a method for other LEAs to consider ways to collaborate with Frederick and others across the state. So it is 5:30, which means our meeting is about to adjourn.
Can I add in there, John, real quick, just so
Yes.
people know, on our website, the materials will be available in 2 places. If you go to the meetings tab and if you go there today, it's going to be current meetings. If you go there tomorrow, it will be a meeting archive. It will have meeting materials there. And then it's also listed under the tab of About AIB under Pillar 2 Advisory Committee. We have a list of all of the work for each of our pillars and their advisory committees. So anybody listening online or watching the recording, that's where you can find these materials. And the one final thing I wanted to mention, Dr. Sergo, you know that the Blueprint coordinators are also kind of digging into some of this work as well. They helped, they had a small group of people that were trying to make sure that we clearly defined the teacher work time for 60%. And, you know, is that student work day, teacher work day? Whose hours are we talking about? So I would encourage districts to also make sure that they're just talking to their Blueprint coordinator and raising that question. And then what happens is the coordinators also then convene regularly and bring those questions to the group, so that we're ensuring that conversations happening around the state and that we're all kind of in alignment and in agreement, or can get answers from MSDE. So there's definitely some avenues to continue raising those kinds of questions. And I think that this is going to be a topic of future meetings. Is that right, John?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we are, this topic is something that we plan to discuss in the future. So to everyone listening, our pillar is planning to definitely focus a bit more on the career ladder. We are considering reaching out to other states that have already established career ladders to look at their models. And we're going to continue diving into lots of the nuances that are within Pillar 2. We're not sure when our next meeting will be, but will probably be within the next month or so, as our committee members look at their schedules and figure out what can work out best. So with that, I want to say thank you so much to everybody who came and participated. Thank you so much for everybody who watched on live stream. And we hope that you have a wonderful evening.